Evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm delighted to say that we've got Adrian. I'll let him say his second name. I never get that right. Anyway, do you want to say it, Adrian?
Yeah, Incledon-Webber.
Oh, Incledon-Webber.
That's it.
Lovely. Adrian Incledon-Webber with us tonight. I met Adrian quite a few years ago now, actually, because Colin Mew had come along to your courses and said to me, "Oh, really interesting man and what he does and everything. Perhaps he'd come along and and you like live in Yorkshire, but you came along to our group in Southampton, did a brilliant evening with dowsing and everything. And since then, you've gone on to write 2 books. Well, I think you've come to us when the first book. Yeah. You've come to us 3 times.
No, I've got 3 books.
Oh, 3 books. Yeah, well, I heard you just mention that other one about dowsing, but the 2 healing home ones.
Yep.
Yeah, healing home ones. So that I've got the first healing home book. Ta-da!
Well done.
But I know that we're talking about your second one tonight. But I mean, every page you go to, because I think that's a really good thing to do with a book. Every page you go to, there's going to be something on it that's relevant or, you know, rings a bell for you or whatever. So I just thought I'd read this bit out. And it's not a long piece, but just to give you an idea of what Adrian's about. So I was renting a spacious apartment in Godalming,
yeah, that's, don't worry.
Yeah. When I first started dowsing for geopathic stress, the universe decided I was needed a direct lesson as the effects of the underground water on me, how detrimental they are to the healing process and how easy it can be to clear them. I found that when I went looking for geopathic stress area, it was best to start where you sit for most of the day, where you work and where you are working at home, or where you sit in the evening when you get home. It is very likely to be the worst location in the house. This is how it turned out to be for me. I started dousing the apartment and I found the most detrimental water vein ran directly beneath where I was sat whilst working at the computer. No wonder I'd started to get headaches, felt a little nauseous and sometimes quite faint. I won't read any more than that, but just that alone just tells you how important it is where you sit in your room, where you work at your house, you know, where you are most time in the house. Or if you don't want to go into that particular area, or if there's an area that you don't like going into. So there's just so much to all of this, isn't there, Adrian? So I don't even know where you're going to start, but thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure. A pleasure. Right, so shall I hit my screen share and see if it will work?
Yeah, wonderful.
Let's have a quick look. So I need to do that and share. How's that? Is that?
Yeah, there you are.
Whoop, let me just pop that. Right, we're still there.
We are.
Wonderful. Okay, Jackie, thank you very much for having me on. And it's going to go into the various directions tonight. I often kind of wonder what I'm going to say. A bit like the book in many ways, that or all 3 books. You kind of start on the first letter or the first word, and you just keep going. And the same with the talk. We'll obviously have some questions and answers at the end, hopefully. Brilliant. And I'll see what I can do to sort them out for you. So just briefly, the reason I wrote the Heal Your Home to the Next Level is I never want the books to go out of date. And of course, Earth energy, or the Earth, is changing all the time. The energy patterns change all the time. And it was about, I think, maybe 8-9 years ago since I'd written the first book. And so much had kind of not necessarily suffered change, but also there's a lot of new stuff that has come through. So it's an update and there's a lot of new information in there as well. They both work well together. So it's still, here we go, the sales pitch. It's still good to start with number 1 and then go to number 2. But they're written in a way that I feel people can connect to. It's almost as though I'm writing as though I'm sitting in front of somebody, which is the only way that I can do it. And it's a bit like the talk, and we'll just see how the talk progresses. And any questions, we'll have a go at the end.
Wonderful.
Right, first thing. One of the most important aspects that I always try and leave people with whenever I'm doing a course or talk is to really talk about psychic protection, and also how to do perhaps a clearing on yourself at the same time. Now, I tend to go into some fairly dark and nasty places when I'm working, even though it's remotely from my home up here in the Yorkshire Dales. You still connect to people, you still connect to the house, and you still connect to these energies. And it's very easy to be attacked is the wrong word, but you can be sort of quite quickly influenced by these dark energy patterns. So I always make sure that most mornings, and I do have days off or off days when, you know, weekends when I just go and walk the dog and don't do it. But just sometimes, you know, you need to make sure that you do it every day rather than have weekends off. So it's a fairly simple method, which we'll do as a short meditation, just to get everybody in the mood, and a short clearing message. But it doesn't matter where you are, you know, whether you're dowsing, whether you're doing the healing work. I often mention the word Ouija boards to people, and it's amazing how many people recoil in horror to say, well, I wouldn't use one of those because, you know, you're in touch with the devil. But of course, yes, you can be. You know, the first question you tend to ask is there anybody out there? And of course, there always is. And if you're lucky, you get a good spirit to talk to, but in most cases, you get a trickster. But of course, the same sort of opening is there for any healing work you do and any dowsing work you're doing. So, you know, just be very, very mindful of what doorways you open when you do this work. And of course, you can be out shopping, at school, hospitals, restaurants, pubs. You know, you don't know who sat in that chair before you sat in it. If it was somebody perhaps who was very depressed, and you are sensitive, you can pick up on those energy patterns very quickly. In a hospital, obviously, there's some good stuff that goes on, but there's also a lot of tragedy that goes on in hospitals. And again, if you're sensitive and you're not fully protected, you can pick up all sorts of detrimental attachments, spirit attachments, and other dark energies. At school, I always used to do a clearing on my boys when they came back from school or came back from college. Again, they're mixing with lots of other people's vibrational energies, some good, some not so good. And of course, if you're out shopping, any spirits or whatever else can follow you back in the car, and you've suddenly got a pair of, or two or three unwanted and unpaying house guests. So what I tend to do every morning is just literally work with my chakras, and we'll talk through this in a second. I tend to breathe the colors in through the various chakra points of my body. And I tend to use the solar plexus as the center point, the power point. Other people use the heart chakra. So it really depends on how you feel about it as to which chakra you bring the colors into. So as I breathe in, let's say I'll take my feet chakra to begin with, my feet chakras. I'll tend to breathe in brown, coming up my legs in through my base chakra, my sacral, into my solar plexus. And at cellular level, we're actually pushing it through our physical body, cleansing that. And we've got the words coming up on screen in a minute, moving through the physical body, moving through the whole of your auric field. And when the color gets to the outer edge of your auric field, anything that's been displaced is taken, disposed of appropriately into the light automatically. It then shrinks to form a 2-inch layer around, firstly, the physical body. The second would be the next layer outside your first layer, and building up a bit like layers of an onion. Okay, so it's very simple. I'll talk through it. What I just need you to do is just read the following statement when it comes up on screen. And as you do, the intention is then set, and upstairs will be doing a lot of the work for you. All you then do is just listen to what I'm saying. You can close your eyes and just go with the flow and just use your breath. Okay? Don't worry if you have to take 2 breaths in between, because I have to say a little bit in between breaths. So we'll just take it steady, see how it flows, and see how you feel afterwards. Okay? Come on, do that. Right. If you can see all that, if you just want to read through that, don't worry too much about the words. Okay. So just give me a wave when you're ready. Okay, thanks, Hilary. Thank you, Mary. Thanks, Jackie. And Michael, how are you doing there? Okay, right. So if you just want to close your eyes and just take just a couple of breaths just to settle us down. And with your next breath in, we start with the feet. So we're breathing in brown through the soles of our feet. See this brown color moving up your legs, through your base chakra, through your sacral, and it's held at your solar plexus at cellular level. And then as you breathe out, this beautiful brown color will move through the whole of your body, clearing what we've just read, moving through the whole of our auric field. It gets to the edge and everything gets disposed of appropriately, and then it shrinks to form the first layer around your body. The next breath in, we're breathing red ochre, so like a red brick color through our knees, up through our base chakra, our sacral, into our solar plexus once again. And when you're ready to breathe out, it's moving through the physical body, through your auric field to the very outer edge, and then it shrinks to form the second layer. We move up to our base chakra. We're breathing in red through the base chakra, moving up through the sacral into the solar plexus. And as you breathe out, we're just pushing that color through the whole of our physical body once again, through our auric field. At the edge, everything gets sent to the light, and the red shrinks to form the next layer. We then move up to our sacral chakra. We're breathing in orange through the front and back. See this lovely orange color move up to our solar plexus. We breathe out, it moves through the whole of our physical body, through to the very outer edge of our auric field, and it then collapses to form the next barrier. We then move up to our solar plexus and we breathe in the color of the sun through the front and back of our solar plexus. Top of the breath at cellular level, it pushes out through our physical body, cleansing it once again of everything that we've read, moving through to the outer edge of our auric field, and then it shrinks to form the next barrier. We then move up to our heart chakra. We're breathing in green through the front and back, down into the solar plexus, breathing out. See that green moving through our physical body, moving through to the very outer edge of our auric field, and it shrinks once again to form the next outer barrier. We then move up to a recently opened chakra, either called our upper heart chakra or thymus. We're breathing in aquamarine, beautiful pure color, down through to our solar plexus, breathing out at cellular level, pushing it through our physical body, through our auric field once again, reaches the outer edge, everything gets disposed of into the light, and it shrinks to form the next outer barrier. We then move up to our throat, from the front and the back, breathing in light blue, down to our solar plexus once again, breathing out cellular level through our physical body, through our aura to the very outer edge, and it shrinks to form the next outer barrier. Moving up to our brow chakra, we're breathing in dark blue, this amazing indigo color moving down once again through to our solar plexus. Top of the breath, just pushing it out through the physical body, through the auric field, which then shrinks to form the next barrier. Our crown chakra, breathing in purple, down to our solar plexus, pushing it out on the breath, through our physical body, cleansing it, through our auric field, cleansing it. Then it shrinks to form the next outer barrier. We stay with our crown chakra for the next 3 breaths. Firstly, breathing in silver, down to our solar plexus. Top of the breath, pushing it out, cleansing the physical body again, cleansing the aura, for it then to shrink to form the next outer layer. And now we breathe in gold. See this wonderful gold color moving down into our solar plexus, pushing it out on the breath through the physical body to the outer edge of our auric field. Again, everything moves into the light, and it then slowly shrinks to form the final outer barrier. And the final breath of the session is just to breathe in divine white light from above, and to breathe in divine white light from Mother Earth, meeting in the solar plexus, and that just spreads through the whole of our physical body, through the whole of our auric field, and stays with us, protecting us and keeping us clear of any other detrimental or inappropriate energy patterns. And then when you're ready, just open your eyes and just see how you feel. Have a look around the room just to see whether the room's changed, because people often say it becomes lighter and brighter. It's a bit like if you wear glasses, you've suddenly put your glasses back on and everything becomes crystal clear. Okay. So we can perhaps get some questions on that when we get towards the end. But I try and do that every day. It's important that, you know, in the past, people have said, well, just put a bubble of white light around yourself. But of course, if you've been somewhere and you've got attachments or got stuff that's sticking to your auric field, all you're doing is keeping those attachments inside the bubble of white light. What this does is twofold. It's cleansing the body of the auric field of all the nasties and keeping you fully protected as well. So let's see how we get on. I'll move on. Right, I wanted to put this in because a lot of people ask me, how does distance healing work? And what are we sending to people? You know, you hear a lot of people throw these comments out like, you know, we're channeling the light, or we, you know, we'll send light and love over to you. What does it actually mean? And I've got a friend of mine called Paul Gerry, who's a clinical neurophysiologist at Exeter Hospital. And whenever I say something, Paul goes, what does that mean? And of course, it's phrases that you've used for quite a while, but he just stops and makes you think that you've got to start looking at this and say, actually, what do we mean when we say distant healing, or what we're sending? So just very briefly, light radiates from its source in waves. So we've got one wave is electric, the other is magnetic. So it's known basically as electromagnetic radiation. Light travels at 186,000 miles an hour, and these light waves can actually penetrate any object or person. And I've just seen my wife spelling mistake there, of rather than any object or person. But you know, that's kind of scientific. But what I began to find as I was doing research into this for my new book is the shortest wavelength and the most powerful is purple. And the longest wavelength is red, and it's less powerful. And look what it comes into. So the higher vibration of our crown chakra is purple, the lowest vibration is red. So if you can look at what happens with it, even if we just look at things from a scientific point of view, it kind of fits in so well with actually what the chakras do. So higher vibration, we know we open up our crown chakra. With a lower vibration, we've got our base chakra and then obviously all the different chakras in between, including the thymus chakra. So it just shows that, what we're actually sending out to people, yes, is a vibration, electromagnetic radiation, if you like, but it just shows you really when you start breaking it down into other terms, how the Indians in the Asian continent got it perfectly right, even though they'd probably never heard of how fast light transmits or actually what light was. So I just thought it was quite an interesting one to actually look at, how distance healing can actually work. And also when we say we channel the light, what are we actually channeling? So we know that scientists have been measuring the light, the higher wavelengths that's naturally produced by our universe and other distant universes. So when we sort of tune in, to me, we're literally channeling the energy of the universe. We've got to look at, obviously, a higher being. There has to be a higher being to allow anybody that's doing any healing work to do any healing work. But when we say we're sending people light and love, literally, we've got so much power behind us. But if we start looking at, where it all comes from, we have so much more that we can actually offer people if we just look at what we're actually doing, where it comes from, and how we actually do it. Okay? So it's very basic. I go into it in the new book in a lot more complicated ways than that, but it just felt right for me just to sort of talk through that tonight as an intro into generally what we as healers actually do, and where does the light come from? I think it's fascinating stuff. I hope you too as well. Okay, geopathic stress. We're looking at some of the problems that people face when they move into houses or they've been in houses long term. I won't go into too much of this because we've got some sort of different stuff to talk about in a minute. But to me, when I first started off in a very basic way, I'd walk into people's houses when I had my own estate agency business, and you'd walk into some of them and get a lovely warm glow, and others you'd walk into and it just didn't feel right. There was something going on there. But of course, in those days, I couldn't put my finger on what it was. But it was amazing the houses I walked into and got that feeling, how difficult some of them actually were to sell. People would come back and say, the house actually ticks every box. It's the right accommodation, it's the right area, the kids would love it, the great garden, but we just don't like it, so we're not going to buy it. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I started doing a lot of hands-on healing. I'd gone through all my Reiki bits and pieces, and then started to, look at when people left my house, which was nice and clear and tidy and, all in tip-top condition energetically, they'd go back to their own homes, and it didn't matter how good they felt after a healing in my place, they'd go straight back into the environment, which was probably causing them problems more so than perhaps the physical ailments they came to me with. It was going back into the house with all the stuff that you're now reading on screen, detrimental energy forms, spirits, old human emotion, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, psychic cords, all the earth energy patterns, underground water, which could cause people a lot of problems. So I then decided that I better start getting my self in gear to actually start working not just on people when they were there, but begin to work on them as houses, work on their houses. And of course, all I then heard was upstairs saying, thank God he's finally got it. Having spent 25 to 30 years as an estate agent, it took me a while to actually say, well, let's try and combine everything I've learned selling houses and the energies I feel when I walk into people's houses with the healing work that I was actually doing physically on people's bodies. So they gave me a lot of help from day one. But of course, over that time, you live, you learn, you do a house healing. And one of the big questions for me is always at the very end, is there anything else for me to find that I haven't done before that's affecting these people in a detrimental way? And of course, if you get the answer yes, you've then got to start working your way through a myriad of questions to actually try and work out what the problem might be. So my list, when I first started off, my checklist was probably maybe sort of 20 questions to ask. It's now gone up to 57. And I think probably in the next few weeks, probably up to 58, because there's something else coming through that I need to work on. So maybe next time I give Jackie's talk, we can talk about that. So, everything's changing all the time. People change, the energy patterns of the planet change. And even with Lionsgate, fairly recently, you need to start looking at what it actually means to people on a physical, spiritual, and mental level, and especially with what we've all gone through with the COVID recently. And of course, with the new book, I've put in various other chapters of dementia, some of the regrets we have, self-love that a lot of people don't have, divorce and family separation. Now, with dementia, for instance, I always feel as though it should be spelt in a different way, with changing the first E to an I. So it becomes dementia, but as in dimensions rather than purely dementia from a mental illness point of view, because I tend to find with a lot of people when I do work on families and find that one of the parents or one of the couple has dementia, they seem to be spending an awful lot of time in a different dimension. It's almost as though they're spending more time in the spiritual world, being prepared for passing over. My father was a classic case, and it was really him that I wrote about in the book, that he would be spending a lot of time almost off planet, almost not in his body. And because he was one that always felt that when he died, that was it, good night, finished, nothing was waiting for us. He's since come back many times and told me that, yeah, I was right, that he was wrong, and he's having a grand time up there. So dementia, I think, can be worked on very, very well with doing house healing work, picking out on attachments, illness trigger points, which we'll cover in a few minutes' time. Regrets, obviously we all have regrets. And I often say to people doing a talk or doing any courses, if you could actually go back over your life and start to change things that you feel you've done wrong, would you go and do it? And there's an awful lot of people put their hands up and saying, yes, we would. And then I say, okay, so if you go back and change things, and it means you're not sitting here doing what we're doing today, would you go back and change? And often they would say, no, we are quite glad that almost the problems we've had and the regrets we've got from the past actually have led us down a completely different path that we would have gone down initially. So yeah, perhaps you're right. Perhaps we shouldn't go back and change things that we've done wrong, because they're all part of life's lessons. But what we can do is do a sort of like an ancestral healing, or do some healing on our parents, do some healing on the parental patterning that we were hit with over the first 5 or 6 years of our lives. It does seem that indoctrination doesn't take long from our family, but then we spend the rest of our lives trying to change some of the lessons that our parents gave us, which of course also then leads to self-love. And it's very difficult. A lot of people, when I ask them, I'd often with a talk saying, okay, hold your hands up, those people who actually love themselves. And you maybe at a talk of maybe sort of 50, 60 people, get 5 or 6 people holding their hands up. And I'll ask them individually, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love yourself? And people will say, 5 or 6 or 7 out of 10. And I'd say, well, in that case, you actually don't love yourselves. And they say, why? Well, it has to be 10 out of 10. There can be no other way. If it's 10 out of 10, you love yourself, you can then work for other people in a much, much more cohesive, if you like, together manner. How do you love yourself? Well, we are all individual human beings. There is nobody on this planet that's gone through life the way that I have, the way that Michael has, Hilary, Mary, Jackie, anybody that I can't see on screen. We all will look at life in very, very different ways. So we can all bring something to the table. And by being unique human beings, that automatically should lead to self-love, because there's nothing else like any of us in the known or unknown universes. So if we begin to look at ourselves in very different ways as these 100% unique, flawed human beings, but everybody is perfection. And that, to me, it always gives me a buzz when I kind of go through that and say, yeah, you know, I am very special. I love myself. And by loving myself, I can actually send that love to other people. It's a hard one to do, but just, you know, baby steps. And yeah, it should start working. The bottom one is always the tragic bit. You know, I get so involved with divorced couples, family separations, and a lot of house healing work is not just done on people's houses, but also the families as well. And we'll talk about that as we go through. So that's a little bit about what I was kind of trying to sort out in the new book. With any house healing, I always tend to start with soul rescue or spirit rescue or ghost rescue, whatever people want to call it. There are very few houses that I find, unless I find somebody who's doing this work, that hasn't got some form of spirit floating about the house. They will come in for many different reasons. Obviously, illness is one. If you're doing healing work and you're not protecting yourself properly, is another. Newborn babies, their energy can be very attractive to spirits walking past your house. Teenagers, you know, going through puberty, you know, that roller coaster ride of human emotions can be a great sort of turn on, if you like, for spirits. So it's always worthwhile looking very closely at how many spirits you've got in your house. If we have time, we can do a soul rescue. It's very, very simple. Or if you've got my book or you talk with Jackie, and I can send out a very simple invocation that I use to do soul rescue. Don't be too scared. Just make sure you're fully protected and start talking to the spirits, whether you dowse or whether you use intuition or whether you get messages through from upstairs. Just talk to them. Show them what awaits them as they move through into the light. You know, I was asked, you know, a sort of perfect, almost like a video to be shown to them. So they start to be able to move through to this Garden of Eden or paradise before I've even finished talking with them. So it's a very, very important part of working on people's houses. A lot of people who work on geopathic stress tend not to look at the spirit side of things. And they often don't look at the human emotional side of things in people's houses and stick very much more to the earth energies, which you see on the bottom line: fault lines, dynamic energy lines, earth energy lines, and energy channels. But stuck human emotion is a biggie. That's what I find an awful lot of in people's houses. And it's surprising the amount of people who email me or call me and say, look, we're trying to sell our house. It's been on the market for 6 months to a year. People walk in, they seem to like it, and we don't hear anything from them again. So I said, okay, right. So the first thing you need to do is clear all the human emotion out of the house. That's everything that you've created. And, you know, any argument you have, any disagreement you have will create detrimental emotional patterns or vibrational patterns. Past owners, in fact, anybody that walks into your house, family, friends, workmen, workwomen, anybody that's coming in to work in the house, if it's a brand new house, it's all the people who've been able to do the plastering, the decorating, the wiring, fitting kitchens and bathrooms. There's always going to be other people's emotional or vibrational energy that's stuck inside somebody's house. So it's a good place to start. Subconsciously, people walk in, and normally the first, to me, 5 seconds of people walking into a house is the most important time. If people feel uncomfortable walking into your entrance hall or straight into your living room because of all the emotional upsets that you've had over the years, even if it's a subconscious decision, they're not going to buy your house. So it's a good one to actually do the clearing work. And we'll do a quickie at the end of the talk, just showing you how quick a lot of this can be done. And obviously with the earth energies, we haven't got time to go into too much detail of what the four are beneath, but they're just part of the earth energy patterns that can cause people problems. forgive the picture, but we also suffer from stress lines, both modern day stress lines and obviously all those from the past. If we cover the past ones first, it can be anything from a murder down the street. It could be domestic disharmony from the people next door or down the road. It can be most things that are man-made. So let's say you've had a whole range of new houses being built in the village you live in. Earth disturbance can also cause those problems. And the earth does tend to fight back. It creates all sorts of vibrational energies which can disrupt the homeostasis of the home and the body. Football hooligans, you don't find many of them unless you've got Portsmouth and Southampton playing, in which case maybe you start having a few problems. But certainly those times have changed quite a bit. But it's the animosity generated between people who can also set these stress lines up. I don't tend to find many of them that have been set up within my clients' homes. If I do, I tend not to normally tell my clients because you're kind of dipping into their personal lives in big ways. So it's better to kind of say, look, it's happened further down the street. But the biggie now is I'm picking up a lot of stress lines, human created stress lines that have been created through the current pandemic, through COVID, through the coronavirus. There's a lot of people, including people I've been talking to recently, who have literally not left their house for almost 2 years, certainly 18 months. They get food parcels delivered through Tesco's or Waitrose. They may have Zoom calls with friends and family and whatever, but they have not left their house or their flat because they're worried. And of course, it's not just them worrying about it, it's hundreds of other people. And as you get this combined, you get all their thoughts combined, it sets up some incredibly powerful stress lines. And those need dealing with because they will, as they come through your house, if you're sensitive or if you've been affected by lots of other problems in the house, you're going to be hit big time with these. And again, it's just throws the body out of kilter. So it doesn't matter how strong you are, if you're being affected, let's say, by other earth energy lines, human emotional problems, spirit problems, attachments, stress lines will certainly add to the stress in the house. So we need to find out where they are. To me, I like to go back to source to find out what created them, work on the source. And then when you worked on the source, if it's 2 or 3 people having a punch up in the street, you do healing, you send them healing, and then you send healing on a complete line. So not only is your client's house being worked on, it could be many other hundreds of people. But what I tend to say is as appropriate, because some people will need to feel the effects of these lines, perhaps to nudge them onto their true pathway. A lot of clients I talk to who aren't well have been nudged onto this pathway because of an illness, because they've been to see the doctors. The doctors can't quite work out what the problems are and why they've had the problems in the first place. So they start going down the alternative healing route, and then suddenly they'll come across me doing my work. So, it's worthwhile looking and sending the appropriate healing to as many people as we possibly can. Which brings us really to illness trigger points. It was a very tragic case that brought me into it. What I've really tried to do with the new book is, well, in fact, with the first book that I wrote, it was very much case studies. But with the new book, what I've tried to do is actually bring in the reason why I found the problems in the first place. So with illness trigger points, it was a lady who had cancer. She was in remission, but she wanted the house to be healed, not just for herself, but also for her family when she passed over, because she always felt that the cancer would come back, which sadly it did. But it was a reason, something had happened when she was in either 12 or 13 years old, which I won't go into now because we haven't got time. And I'm not just trying to sell my book, but anything from the past that it could be stress, it could be a marriage breakup, it could be death of parents, death of a loved one, stress from trying to pass exams. These things will actually affect the body at cellular level. So it's a bit like a miasm. We don't feel that we've done anything wrong, but it was at a time that perhaps a cell went rogue because of the stress levels, and we need to actually start working back to find out when that happened, to do a healing on that, and that will help you at cellular level to get rid of any other potential problems in the future. So it's a very important part of the human psyche. We think we've forgotten about this stuff, but it can come back and haunt you many years later. Vows and contracts, something that's come up over the last couple of years. Now, what I found, what really got me is I've been married a couple of times, and I won't go into why these things have happened, but I'm very happily married to my missus now, and we've passed our 10-year period, which is a record for me. But it's amazing when you start looking back. We'll take marriage as a contract or vow, for instance. Yeah, you get your decree nisi, and then you get your decree absolute. But don't forget, when you get married, you've said the words if you like, to God. You've sent it to the universe. So it doesn't matter how many bits of paper you get. If you haven't rescinded that contract in the eyes of God, then to me, that contract is still there. It's still valid. So you've got to make sure that, it's very simple to stop. You just say, look, yes, I know I uttered these words in the past, till death us do part, but now we have parted, and I would like to rescind my contract in the eyes of God or the eyes of the Lord or whoever it was that you feel is appropriate, and for you to continue life as an individual rather than being tied to somebody in the past. And it's amazing, when I gave a talk to somebody a couple of months ago about it, it was amazing how many of the men were getting bits of paper out, scribbling it down to say, I better do that because I haven't done it yet. But of course, it just keeps it all open. And you think you've parted. In many cases, you haven't, because you've still got that little niggle there that just hasn't quite gone. Now, let me just go back to that. One of the reasons why I came to vows initially is I was working on a lady when I was living just outside Bath, and we'd worked on her house and successfully, and it was fine. And then it was about a year later, she called me and said, I've got a problem with my sister. I said, okay, right. She said, yep, she lives, and I can't tell you where she lives. You probably won't know her, but just in case. And she said, she's going to a university, and my parents bought her a flat to live in, fully fitted. It was a lovely modern day flat. They've just been down there, and the flat looks as though it's been burgled, broken into, and ransacked. But when quizzed, I talked to my sister about it, and she said, I didn't want any of it, so I gave it all away. So they said, well, how are you sleeping? Oh, in a sleeping bag on the bare floorboards, because the carpets had all gone as well. And what had happened, we finally traced it back to a vow that she'd made in one of her past lives or dimensional lives, a vow of poverty. She was a nun, and she'd sort of gone into a convent or into a nunnery, and her vow was a vow of poverty. And it was that was still leaking through, if you like, the dimensional veil, the dimensional curtain, which was affecting her so badly in this life. And she hadn't been well. She had suffered from bouts of anorexia, so she wasn't a particularly strong person. And there were quite a number of attachments within her auric field, which we moved. And there's some quite nasty stuff within the flat, which was then moved. But it was this vow of poverty that took me a while to actually work out what it was and why she had reacted that way. She then went back to live with her parents, and it all worked very well after that. She went back to university about 18 months later and got her degree. And I think from what I understand, she's moving through now and doing BAs and all sorts of other things. So we finally got to the bottom of it all and worked through it. But the family were aghast when they went in there. They just thought, she'd been burgled. But they couldn't believe it when she said, no, I just gave it all away. I didn't want it, couldn't find any use for it. And she was kind of subsistence living really on bread and a bit of water. So just be careful, just check. You dowsers out there or you intuitives out there, just make sure that any vows you might have mentioned or set in this life or any other past stroke dimensional lives aren't still there and valid. And I'm going to show you a little bit how we can actually start working our way through them. It's been an interesting time, and I tend to find when I wrote the second book, and I thought, well, what am I going to put in it that's different apart from, you know, a bigger checklist? And to me, it was quite important that I started to introduce to people why the new questions have come through. Because when I'm working and it's that final question, is there anything else for me to find that's detrimental to the family? Yes, there is. And it's then trying to actually work out some of the questions that I've asked to actually find out exactly what it is that's the problem. So things like vows and contracts, illness trigger points was a very, very valid thing to do. Dowsing to me is a very important factor in all this. Whether you use a pendulum, whether you use dowsing rods, whether you body douse, or you just get messages through from upstairs. You know, we can all, as we work through all this, become more and more intuitive. We get more messages coming through, and it's important that we don't dismiss them. And I get some weird stuff coming through, even recently when I think for people who are on my mailing list, got an update about split auric fields. And I was working with a lady who I think may have tuned in, I don't know, tonight. And as I was working with her, all I heard from upstairs was, she's got a split auric field. And it was me going, what? Pardon? I tend to be a bit thick sometimes and thinking, well, is it me, or have I heard that, or is somebody outside said it? And it really just got to the stage of trying to work out what on earth was a split auric field. So have I got one? No. You know, thankfully I hadn't got a split auric field. Okay, so we needed to work out what happened. And basically it seems to be that as we connect with upstairs, part of our auric field splits and actually goes into the ether, that goes into the universe. And it's that part of our auric field which helps our connection with the spirit world, the universe, the highest of the high, whoever you connect with. Which is great, and it will help with the messages to come through. It will help with the healing work. It will help for you to channel the light, to channel the healing, and then send it through to your clients or those people you're working on. But of course, what we need to then do is make sure at the end we close ourselves down. And we'll be doing that in a couple of minutes as we get through to the end. But Jackie, you want about what, 10 minutes of questions at the end?
Yes, that'd be great if we can, please.
Yep, so we've got about 10 minutes to go. So, right, perfect. Okay, so what I tend to use as a very, very quick method of being able to help people is to use what I call an ultrafine mesh net of light and love. Now, with this, it's a bit like a trawler's net, and I just picture it. Let's say we're going to be doing healing on one particular person, or you can use this for doing a healing on the house by changing the words slightly. But for those people who don't practice psychic protection every day, then what we can then do is to do this. So what I picture is one particular person or individual members of the family, and I just, from the outer edge of their auric field, pull this ultrafine mesh net of light and love through the aura, through the physical bodies. And as it moves all the way through at the end, it picks up all the junk you see in front of us, and I'll talk through that in a second, takes it up to the light and disposes of it in an appropriate fashion. So all of a sudden, you've got a very, very clean, very sort of healed person on your hands. And then if you put them in the bubble of white light or put the rainbow light around them, as we talked about first and foremost, they're fully protected whilst their own body starts to strengthen itself and the auric field starts to glow brighter. If you walk in, before I ever walk into anybody's house, before I ever walk into a pub or a restaurant for a bite to eat or a couple of pints. I always pull an ultrafine mesh net of light and love through it first and foremost. So it means that I can relax, I can go in. So I ask that anything that might be detrimental or inappropriate to me while I'm visiting the place is taken away, disposed of appropriately to allow me to be safe and sure when I walk in, I can relax and enjoy myself. When you walk out, you can just say whatever energies need to be put back in to ensure that everybody else has a good time. Please do so. So what I then tend to do with this, I'll work my way through it. And in fact, what we can do with all of you, if you have one particular person in your mind that you feel you'd like to do some healing work on, just have that person in your mind now, and we'll actually picture this ultrafine mesh net of light and love moving through their aura and moving through their physical body, okay? Or many people, if you've got several people, it doesn't matter. We can do lots and lots of people. So I always ask that with the powers that be, the highest of the high, that as I pull this ultrafine mesh net of light and love through our friends and family's auric field and physical body, that they are cleared of all detrimental and inappropriate attachments, all lower animal life forms, their seeds and tentacles, all human manifested thought forms and life forms, cutting all psychic and physical cords that are no longer necessary, all worries, all concerns to be cleared, any miasms, which are the cellular level problems that we've kept, all traumas and upsets, all detrimental parental patterning that is no longer needed, all parasites and any other detrimental energies that are inappropriate to them and us. I also ask that everything that has been removed or dislodged is taken into the light and disposed of appropriately. I ask that the healing takes place not only in this dimension, but all other dimensions that are similarly affected. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a nice clear all. And just see over the next few days if you've got any feedback from the people that we've just worked on, just to see if they feel any different. Okay? So it's a very easy way. And what I tend to do with my own room as well, my study or my healing room that I'm sitting in at the moment, the only person that's allowed in was my old Springer Spaniel that Jackie saw. We have a new 12-week-old Springer Spaniel pup. He's fine, but if Alison comes in for any reason, once she's gone, I always tend to make sure that anything detrimental or inappropriate she might have left behind is just cleared, to leave my room, if you like, spick and span for me to work in, that there are no other energies out there that might cause me problems. We get on well together, but her vibrational energy doesn't vibrate the same as mine, certainly when I've logged into upstairs. So you just need to make sure that your room is completely clear and it's your own energy patterns in there. So that's the split aura, the closing down. So we just need to make sure at the very end that we bring those energies back, restoring our auric field to full strength. The thing is, even if you don't get involved in any form of healing and just wish to relax, it's a very good way of actually leaving your work behind, because it will, as we even go to work, I think part of our auric field will split to help really us cope with the stresses and strains of day-to-day work. And then don't forget, we are all, or we can all be inspired when we're at work. It's a bit like children at school. If you're asking them a question they're not sure about, it's amazing how, if you watch their eyes, they often look upwards to try and get the answer. And it's amazing how looking upwards connects them to spirit, and suddenly the answer comes through and they can answer whether it's 2 and 2 is 4, or, the square root of whatever. But we need to make sure we close ourselves down at the end. And it's nice and simple. We just ask that I now wish to close myself down, for my energies to return to normal living levels, and that I'm fully grounded. To ask that any part of my aura that has split from surrounding my physical body, for whatever reason, now to be returned. That all the colors meld together once again to fully restore my aura keeping me safe and protected against outside interference. And finally, for all doorways or portals that I opened, expectedly or unexpectedly during my healing work, are now firmly closed. And that's how I really sort of stop what I'm doing at the end of the day to kind of return myself to the physical world. Because I always tend to find what I'm doing is the real world. The physical world is everybody else's normal world. So it's just a bit of spiritual hygiene to, as we log on, that's fine, but we just close ourselves down to return to our families once again. And there we are, the book. You can get it from my website. It's on Kindle, it's on Amazon and various places. And if you're interested, I tend to send out a newsletter once a month, just really giving people a bit of an insight into what I find is going on, perhaps the changes. And obviously Ashes to Ashes was a lot to do with what people actually do with their loved ones' ashes once they've passed over. So it was a bit of a sort of kind of fun look at what to do with them. It's on my website. If you go on to www.dowsingspirits.co.uk, log on to resources and newsletters, they will come up on there for you anyway. But by all means, if you want to get any messages coming through, just let me know. That, Jackie, if I stop, shall I stop sharing?
Lovely, yes, thank you.
Is there.
Well, that was a marvellous presentation, absolutely so clear. Thank you so much, Adrian.
Pleasure.
Really, well, I hope everyone agrees. That was very, very good. We've got a question. We have to ask, do we have to ask permission before we do the clearing on someone or something else?
I always say no, Jackie, because the way I look at it, healing doesn't come from us. It comes from the powers that be. So really, let's say I wanted to send you healing and the powers that be don't want me to send it to you. It doesn't matter how much healing I try and send, it's not going to get there. So I always say, if the healing's appropriate, may it please take place, and really throw it back up to upstairs for it to happen. So I never ever ask permission, but I allow upstairs to do what's necessary to be done. And
do you find normally they would, do you know if it goes or not?
Yeah, in most cases, just because I was a salesman for a lot of my life, I do give them a bit of hell every now and then, just to say, come on, guys, I want it to happen now rather than in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, I haven't been hit by a bolt of lightning yet, but no. I do tend to feel that, I say that, okay, when's it going to happen? They will normally allow it to happen pretty quickly. Sometimes it's when they need it to happen, but generally pretty fast, yeah.
Brilliant. Nikki went saying, I also brought your Heal Your Home when you gave a talk around here about 4 years ago. It was very good. One thing said, which I have never forgotten. One thing you said with any... Sorry, I'm going to have to put glasses on.
That's fine.
One thing, which I've never forgotten, anything the government offers you for free, run a mile. That has been very appropriate for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember saying that. I still say that as well. Yes.
Do you install any positive energies or just remove?
Yeah, but by removing whatever I find that's detrimental, because obviously that's what I've been asked to do in somebody's house, it's always replaced with beneficial energies. It's good to be able to leave the house in peace, balance, and harmony for the family. And of course, the one thing you've got to remember, you are working for the family, not for yourself. And this is where I think a lot of healers can easily go wrong, because they almost can't get themselves out of their own head. And, they almost picture themselves in a particular person's house rather than having the family in mind when they do the work. So everything is left in a beneficial state.
Wonderful. I'm just going to ask you, I know on previous, when you've done the workshops here,
yeah,
I've worked on the house next door because I know that to be a divorce house, 3 divorces. And so for the last 3 years, it's been a new couple in there. So I know I'd worked on it, even though I don't know the layout. I bought the meshing and, I think of that sort of, but they're actually going to move now because of the because of the house behind them, that's playing the loudest music every morning, and he's trying to work from home and they got a young child. So it's not actually a problem with their house as such, but it is a problem in the vicinity, and they don't want to put a complaint in because apparently it devalues your house, so they're going to move. And is that something to do with their house, do you think, as well?
No, what trouble is you do find antisocial people wherever you live. Yeah. What I would do is just ask if it's appropriate to actually work on the people playing the loud music. So use the ultrafine mesh net of light and love for the house and the family, just asking that anything that's perhaps causing them to play the music that loud and be antisocial is removed and taken to the light, and see what happens.
Oh, never thought of that. Do you know, because they've been round there and asked politely 3 times, and on the 3rd time got a door shut in their face.
Right.
Yeah, so they're definitely antisocial.
Yeah.
So I'll do that, because you don't even need to.
No, just as appropriate. And, you know, again, if upstairs doesn't want it to happen and there's a reason for your neighbours to move, then they'll have to move. Yeah. But I would always tackle the problem at source.
Yes, thank you. And then when you were doing that, you know, there's more chakra. You work on the 7 chakras, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, probably a bit more now. So
yeah, there's 12 sort of, or even some say 18. So
yeah, I try and keep it between the feet chakra and then the crown, but tending to use now the thymus chakra. It's really important with the thymus. You know, when we're young, it operates at full steam ahead, and it's one thing that actually helps our immune system. But as we get older, it weakens. So, you know, as you get into 60s and 70s, you know, it's almost not functioning. So it's important that we work on that to actually keep it functioning as much as we possibly can.
Donna Maxine, when she does a talk for me, she always tells people, hit your thymus 3 times a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you use things like aquamarine, you know, just bring that color into it every day.
Oh, nice.
It's going to really, really help big time.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Would you say most people do pick up attachments then?
Everybody.
And so if you don't know to clear them, because I doubt many clear them, have they got like heavy amounts, loads of attachments in the house and hit with them?
Some people have, Jackie. You know, it depends on how robust they are as human beings. But of course, you know, if you're a sensitive person, you know, you empathize with people, you sympathize with people. And of course, straight away, if you do that, or you go to see somebody who's not well, or you go and visit a friend in hospital, you know, these things will just attach to your auric field. They're just blobs of human emotion that attach. But of course, after a while, they can start pushing buttons.
Yeah.
So they're not going to make sort of a placid person into an axe murderer, for instance. But, you know, it's a bit like that little red imp sitting on your shoulder, you know, sort of giving you a jab saying, come on, have another beer, or, you know, whatever.
Yes.
So, yeah, I rarely come across people that haven't got them. A lot of healers have them as well, because, you know, a lot of us in the early days, I would believe that the healing work I was doing would protect me. But of course it doesn't. It just opens you up to all sorts of things. And there obviously are some tricksters up there. So spiritual hygiene is for yourself. It's one of the most important things to practice.
That's so good of you to say, because about a month ago, I was told that I'd done a video online on live to Facebook, and a girl in America got in touch with a friend of mine and told her that she felt I had a grey attached to me.
Right. Okay.
I know, and that was such a shock to me. Anyway, Mary, who's with us, she did a smudge. She smudged me.
Yeah.
So that helped, I'm sure. And then I went to see another girl, and just checked that it had gone, and it hadn't completely. Or you know, so she did a clearing, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I did tell people about that, because I think. But then you're saying that that's a normal occurrence, not that would have happened just one time.
No, it's a normal occurrence. And I was working with a lady a couple of months ago, and I'm normally very careful about how I protect myself. But she's an interesting lady. And it was about 3 or 4 hours later, I started really feeling not myself, a bit irritable, a bit of a headache coming on, just kind of feeling out of sorts. And I went for a walk and, you know, did some clearing work on myself. And I suddenly thought, I've got a psychic cord attached, and yeah, you have. But she does quite a lot of healing work herself, and obviously found a way to actually get through. So I cleared that, and very quickly the headache went, and I started feeling back to normal, grounding myself. But it's so easy to be hit by these things. So yeah, just keep a check on yourself in the morning. Do I need to do any work on myself if you're a pendulum dowser or
I've got this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just check first of all, make sure you're okay. And if you're okay, you can start helping other people.
Brilliant. And I love the bit about self-love. I know how important that is.
Yeah.
Bringing in the light. Yeah, I'm glad you explained that, because I mean, we often say we're bringing in so much light, but I've never really thought, what does that mean?
No, I never had either. So just get this nudge every now and then. I thought, well, what do we actually mean? Because it's important that because often people do ask. So I thought, hopefully I've answered it now anyway. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. And what about clutter in the home? If there is a particular part of the home that you find you're always cluttering?
Yeah. Generally, what I find, it tends to be sort of quite a natural progressive state. Once I've done healing work on a house and healing work on the people, you can often, I rarely ever warn them that the side effect is going to be massive decluttering, but it always makes me smile. And I have to be very careful when we do Zoom talks these days. If you're on the telephone, it's not quite so bad. But they said, is it your fault that my husband's now going through the whole of his office now, decluttering, throwing all his old paperwork away? And I go, yeah, probably, yes. And she said, does it affect me? And I said, it probably will do in the next few days. And you get the phone call coming in saying, you bugger.
I think it's a marvellous thing. I hope it has that effect on me.
Yeah, a lot of it is, because of course, a lot of that is just holding on to the old vibrational energy, Jackie, and it's good to say, look, I'll need to let it go now.
Yeah.
And yeah, start it.
We had everything out of the garage yesterday, I'll tell you. So, and I've booked in to get rid of it at the tip tomorrow.
Well done.
Yeah, honestly, it does make you feel better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I've been working with your first book today. Is it okay to start working on the checklist one day and then continue later in the days to come until you are ready to complete the healing? I do make sure I open and close as you directed in the book. And that is from Sharon.
Excellent. Well done, Sharon. Yeah, it is. What I often say to people, because when you start doing this work, Jackie, it's very difficult because a lot of it's new stuff for people. So I tend to find that often I get tired depending on, the house or how many people I'm working on. So I will often do the background work. So working through the checklist over sort of maybe a 2 to 3, 4 day period. It may be shorter, it may be a bit longer, depending on how much I found. But I would always say, however long that takes, that's fine, but try and do the healing all in one go if you possibly can. Because if you do it bit by bit, I tend to find that, let's say we've moved or we've worked on a few earth energy lines, and then you don't do any other work for sort of maybe 4 or 5 days. What I find, that kind of dilutes the work, and it's amazing how all of a sudden some of the old energy patterns can creep back in. So I always tend to find it's very good to actually do all the healing work as much as you possibly can at the same time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrian. This has been such a good evening.
That's a pleasure. Thank you, Sharon. I don't
know if anyone's got any last minute questions. They just want to, are we all good? Unmute if you have got anything you particularly need to say. But I think most people would have probably put.
I have a last question, Jackie and Adrian.
Yeah.
This is Michael, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to write the question. Quick, when you're looking to buy a new property, which I'm doing right now, it's sometimes difficult when the estate agent is jabbering away and there's
yes.
Any suggestions on how to zero in? Because I really want to get a special place for my new life.
Okay. It's a good question, Michael. What I would generally say, and I'd say the same to most of my clients when they ring me up and say, is this house right for us? I would always say yes, because of course you can do so much energetic work to that house. So I would say, get the house and start doing the work maybe a few days after you've exchanged on it. But once the people have moved out, do some further work on it as you move in, because it's important to cut any ties that the people might have left behind, because if they've been living there for a certain number of years, They will have certain cords that might have attached to the house. They will leave a lot of emotional junk behind as well. It may be the happiest house in the world for them, but their vibrational energy won't match yours. So it's a bit like two halves of a magnet. You know, two bits go together beautifully. You turn them around and they start to repel, and vibrational energy can be a bit the same way. So start working. You can start working through the checklist now before you move in, but I wouldn't necessarily do any work until you've exchanged the contracts, because if you're not careful, the people might suddenly fall back in love with the house and not move. So just be very wary about how much you do now, but every house can be worked on. There was only one person that I ever said to them, look, don't get the house. And that was because there were various telephone masts that were there that wouldn't agree with one of their sons who was quite autistic and really couldn't put up with the energy patterns there. Otherwise, there's so much you can do to a house to make it yours very quickly.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for that lovely email you sent today.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I do apologise. Can a house, I know it sounds really strange for my question, but can a house actually be attached to you? Because I found when I was living with my parents a little while ago, and I was painting the ceiling of my bedroom, and then shortly after I painted, I mean, I took a lot of effort in painting the ceiling, and it was like beautiful afterwards, I have to confess. I mean, I'm not an artist.
Okay.
And then a few months later, the ceiling cracked, and I said to myself, or said to the house, I said, oh, do you not love me then? Because I've actually spent so much effort in actually doing the ceiling and actually, you know, making the place really, really beautiful. And then shortly after that, I tried to move away from the house because of, you know, my work. And then for some reason, the new place I moved into doesn't seem to feel quite right, and things disastrous keep on happening. Okay. And I found myself moving back to my parents' house. Whatever happens, when I ever move away, something awful happens, and I always find myself moving back to my parents' place. It's almost like the house of my parents has tried to say to me in some ways that they do love me, and you're now kind of like attached to me. Is that possible at all, do you think?
It is. So I don't know your name. You're Ruby.
My name's Ruby, yeah.
Yeah.
Ruby. It can. It's very, very possible. You know, I always believe that houses talk to you, and you can suddenly find somewhere that actually is the ideal place for you to live. What I would normally do is just check to make sure you've got three psychic cords. Now, it often comes from the human being rather than the house. And I'd say you've probably got 3 psychic cords leading from you that kind of attach to your parents' stroke house. So it's very easy to, if you've got my book, my first book, it'll tell you how to cut cords. And the second book certainly, well, yeah, my second book certainly does. But I would also say is just the house you're living in, use the ultrafine mesh net of light and love method. Just put it through with the incantations that we had, and just see how you feel about the new place, because you know you're inheriting lots of people's junk. Everything that's gone on in that place from the past is still there. Some of it will be okay for you. A lot of it will be detrimental. So by clearing that and leaving it in, if you like, in peace, balance and harmony for you, it allows you to enjoy yourself there rather than having to be pulled back to your parents' house, which is probably safer vibrationally than the one you're in at the moment. And that's probably why it's happening.
Okay. Oh, thanks ever so much for that. I'll definitely take that advice. Thank you. Really appreciate
Good.
it. And it's been an excellent evening. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Yeah, as Ruby. I'm going to make this the last question.
Can I just have you got somebody?
Well, someone's, Eve's put a question up. I was going to make that the last one, but never mind. Carry on.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to ask Adrian about where you've had illness in a house. How important is it to clear energy when somebody has been terminally ill and subsequently died, not in the home, but you've had that sort of period of time when the illness has permeated the house? Right. How important is it to do the clearing then?
It's very important, Hilary, really. And firstly, I would always check to make sure that person's gone to the light.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they haven't, they can be held back by family grief. They may not want to go, whatever. So I would always double check just to make sure they've gone first and foremost, that they're happy where they are. And then I would always do a healing on the house. Even if it's just using the ultrafine mesh net of light and love method, even if it's just asking that any detrimental or inappropriate energy patterns that may be here from the past are now moved through and taken to the light, to leave the house in peace, balance, and harmony. For me, that should be enough.
Mm-hmm.
Try that. If you've got problems, you can always email me via Jackie or my email address, and we'll have a look and see if there's anything else needs to be done for you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrian. It's really helpful. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Hilary. So yeah, Eve has said, I purchased a condo a year ago and it constantly filled with the scent of roses. I cannot find the source. I have even changed my furnace and cleaned the air ducts. My carpets cleaned. I'm beginning to think it's spirit essence. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it is. And it's probably a guardian spirit, one of your guardians or one of your one of your guides that are coming through. And how nice. I mean, it could be awful. It could be a terrible smell.
Yeah.
But with roses, I don't know whether it's there constantly or whether it comes and goes. But my mother, for instance, who passed away, God knows how many years ago now, whenever she comes through, I always smell a particular perfume that she used to wear. It was very, very particular to her. Estee Lauder White Linen, it was called. So I always know that when she's come through. So it's always worthwhile monitoring to see when it happens. If it's, and say, okay, if it comes through, can I use you to do some healing work for me? But for me, I'm picking up, it's a good sign rather than a bad sign.
It is fairly constant, the smell. And it's a beautiful smell. And everybody walks in and says, oh, it smells lovely. But it's so constant that I, as I said, I got a new furnace, I cleaned the air. I wanted to remove it. And I've used essential oil diffusers and it stays with me. So now I'm thinking I need to use your light and love. I would just, what's a quite good thing to do is actually just acknowledge the person behind who's allowing the smell to take place. It's definitely a female and one of your spirit guides. So if you just say, hi, thank you for coming in. I don't necessarily need the smell all the time, but when you do come in, I very much appreciate it. And can we connect and do some further healing together? So I think it's kind of, I get that sometimes and thinking, yeah, I know you're there. Just give me 5 minutes while I'm doing something else. So just acknowledge them and see if that changes things. Thank you. I feel really good about it now. Thank you.
Good. But wow, congratulations. Fantastic.
Yeah. It's a lovely place.
Really nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And I'm so grateful, Adrian. You'll all get the recording tomorrow. So I send it off to Tom and he puts the little jingle at the front and then he sends it out to everyone. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And Adrian, very, very grateful. Good luck with the new book and all the new customers you're getting.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Jack. And thank you again for having me on there. Brilliant. And thank Pippa as well, after she's there. So
yeah, we've got Pippa in a couple of weeks' time speaking, so she's with us tonight. But next week it's Gemma who's talking about the halls of Amenti. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, I'll see if I can log on. Brilliant.
Oh, lovely. All right, thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Jackie, and thank everybody else for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.